Khanna issued a tweet. Representative Khanna has issued a tweet that is crazed, deranged, delusional, and utterly detached from reality. It is a red-baiting fiasco in which he's making certain claims that are utterly absurd. I want to talk about this red-baiting tweet, this Russophobic God-Man Putin tweet, this caricature the Democrats create as a specter, the thing that they fear, that they teach their kids to fear, the boogeyman. I want to talk about this tweet because I want to point out why this tweet is absurd, why this tweet is entirely and utterly deranged, and how there is so much that is missing in this tweet that makes it absurd on its face. Khanna has been good on many issues. Not on this tweet. He fails miserably on this tweet. I would love for him to come on the show to defend this tweet, but he probably will not do such a thing. So, in lieu of him coming on the show, let's have a conversation about it. Khanna, portrait of a man going through early dementia. Welcome to the Soapbox. Just in the interest of putting all the cards on the table, like I said, I don't dislike Khanna. So that's the first point. The second point is I had invited Khanna on the show. Khanna accepted my invitation on the show. Khanna sent me a message at the last minute, asked me to push that show to the evening, in which I did. I pushed the show to the evening, after which, if I'm not mistaken, they asked me to push it one more time, after which they just did not show up. I would like to tell you that I'm not bitter, but I am. So this is probably going to be somewhat brutal, even though everything that I say right now is going to be absolutely and completely true. Khanna puts out a crazed, deranged, Russia red-baiting, God-Man Putin tweet that is utterly detached from reality. And it's the Democratic narrative, almost this thing that they use to try to assuage their own failures. And Khanna has drunk this Kool-Aid, has floated in this space. And despite being good on some of the issues, is towing the Democratic line on this issue. And I'm sorry, this looks bad on you, Ro. This looks bad on you. Let's take a look at this tweet. I don't want to keep this one long, but I do want to entirely annihilate this tweet. And again, if Ro wants to come onto the show, he's more than welcome to come onto the show to defend this tweet and to explain himself. That would never happen. He would never defend this tweet. He would never go anywhere where someone would ask him questions about this very particular tweet, because he will fall apart in the sunlight on this particular tweet. And the question becomes, you're a learned man. I know you know better. Why are you putting out this type of information? Why are you putting out this particular tweet? What was the mechanics of you sitting there typing this particular tweet? Who typed this tweet? Did you type this tweet? Did somebody on your staff type this tweet? Did they know any better when they typed this tweet? Do you stand by everything that you put into this tweet? Do you? Do you? I want to get into this. Let's talk about it. So, progressives need to be clear about the threat Putin poses to liberal democracy. God-Man Putin. We have to call Russia's systemic interference wrong without engaging in whataboutism. Oh, I love that. And recognize God-Man Putin condoned war crimes in Syria, annexed Crimea, and poisoned political opponents. Oh, let's dive into this. Oh, God, let's dive into this. Progressives need to be clear about the threat Putin poses to liberal democracy itself. Isn't that amazing? Liberal democracy itself. A lot of this that they're talking about has to do with Hillary Clinton losing the race. I can think of 1,000 things of reasons why Hillary Clinton lost that race before ever stepping one iota to any Russian in this process. What about them cheating Bernie Sanders? Ro? How about that? Outright. The party itself cannibalizing itself and cheating a guy who they continuously said wasn't part of the party while lying to the face of the lefties that was in the race. What about that? What about that being a threat to liberal democracy? Cheating candidates. And even if you want to go with this thing of cheating, what about the election itself? Operation Crosscheck, where Republicans were literally knocking people off the voter rolls. especially in the states that Hillary Clinton needed to win. If you are looking for reasons why you lost the race, I would look there. My point is that there's a certain degree of crazed propaganda associated with this, whether you know it or not. There's a certain American exceptionalist perspective that is being taken here, whether you know it or not. And I'm making the point that you have no moral standing. Your country has no moral standing to take this perspective. Even within the context of your own country. You're blaming Russia for something where, again, you can enumerate multiple occurrences of things that were wrong just within the context of your own country. And people within the context of your own country gaming the system. How are you pointing at Russia when all of these elements in your country itself are flawed or broken or ineffective to ensure that the contest is fair and without interference? I'm calling it red baiting propaganda because there are problems that are systemic to your country itself, and your first thought is putting out a crazed tweet blaming Vladimir Putin, God-man Putin, who sits there on a bare-chested, thinking about ways to attack the Democratic Party. That's exactly what he spends his day doing. You have no moral high ground, dude. Why do you think you have a moral high ground in this process? Your country literally obliterated another country, and that's within the context of our lifetime. That is in recent memory. How do you ignore that? How do you ignore the fact that the next president did the same thing to Libya? How do you ignore that? And just so we go further, I want to get to the whataboutism stuff. We have to call Putin's systemic interference wrong without engaging in whataboutism. When I hear somebody tell me, hey, we need to not talk about whataboutism, we need to not engage in whataboutism, the reason why people say that is because they don't want to deal with the things that they themselves have done. They use this notion of whataboutism to try to yada yada the stuff. It's like they don't want to balance the equation. They want to have asymmetrical attention to a particular thing that somebody else is doing, while obscuring the fact that they clearly were doing the same thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't bring up this point about whataboutism. Like the whole point of whataboutism is, hey, let's not pay attention to what I've been doing that is exactly the same thing of the same magnitude that may even be worse. And let's focus all of our attention on that. And if you say anything about it, what about us? That's utter nonsense. You've just tilted your hand to show that you have somewhat of a weak position to make this and pursue this case. And by that, I mean your country, the United States. It's not engaging whataboutism, utter nonsense. And systemic interference? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Systemic interference? Do you know? You may not know. A lot of you may not know. Khanna has to know this. But Vladimir Putin is our guy. He's our guy. He's our guy. We put him in that office. Yes, we did put him in that office. Because when Boris Yeltsin, the drunkard that was running against the communists, he was losing that race. Bill Clinton runs a political campaign in Russia to get him elected. You talking about interfering? That wasn't Facebook and Twitter ads. That was direct intervention into the Russian politics in order to get Boris Yeltsin in. And he raped that country blind. Vladimir Putin was his vice president. That was our guy. Whataboutism. I suppose you would have to say whataboutism. Facebook and Twitter ads versus direct interference in elections. And by the way, again, within our lifetime, how do you ignore that part? How do you literally look at this process and say, we've been doing this for the last 100 years, but ignore that and let's focus on the Facebook and Twitter ads that these Russians were putting out? You know, the masturbation ads and the Jesus ads, those. Ro, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be entirely ashamed of yourself. Do you realize some of the dictators we were putting in these offices were brutal, vicious dictators? These guys committing war crimes. These guys literally toppling governments that they didn't particularly like just because these guys wanted basic rights. And this is just in South America. This doesn't even get into Southeast Asia. I don't understand the placement, the stones, the neck, as some people might say, to make this argument. I don't get the pedestal. I don't get the moral ground. I don't get the status. I don't understand where this argument takes place from. I don't even understand your point of view that likes to obscure all of this other stuff that was associated with the way America operated throughout the world, while simultaneously complaining for the last 3 years about Russian interference in our elections. We are actively taking a role in toppling the government of Syria, Iran, and Venezuela. Utterly astonishing. This is an astonishing tweet. This guy's supposed to be a lefty. Right here. Recognize Putin condoned war crimes in Syria, annexed Crimea, and poisoned political opponents. The poison political opponents is sketchy. I'm not taking your word for that. And I know what you're talking about, the Skirple case. I am not taking your word for that at all. Boris Johnson comes out and says, I know the Russians did it because the lab tells me so. Not so much. The lab is like, yeah, I didn't tell Boris Johnson that. And not just that, the weirdness with it. This high-grade poison, and it kills a hamster or a cat or something. I mean, come on. Come on. Putin condoned war crimes in Syria. Let's talk about that one for the moment. The United States engages in can never get that word out. A covert campaign using the CIA to undermine the Syrian government. In doing so, it goes with this notion of using terrorists as a battering ram, as a proxy of the United States force, so the United States can essentially say our fingerprints aren't on it. Nonsense. Fingerprints were on it. You can read it in the New York Times. I guess my point is this. If the United States is taking methods to try to destabilize and take down a government in that region, another government in that region, seeing as we had already taken down Iraq and already taken down Libya, had been attacking Afghanistan, Somalia, all of these countries, like 7 countries in that region of the world, but using a battering ram to take down Syria, even going so far as putting troops in that region of the world, taking somebody else's land, mind you, and running bombing operations ourselves. Using terrorists. Now, this gets to the point where the government gets destabilized. The planners in this work to some degree. Iran realizes that they're going to be next. Russia doesn't want this to take place. Well, it doesn't want the United States taking down states that they've been in alignment with. And they intervene. Now, what is the pretext to the intervention? The pretext to the intervention is that the United States have been supporting thick-necked, long-beard guys with knives and machetes that had been chopping heads and raping women. All because we wanted Bashar al-Assad out that seat. We knew exactly what we were doing. We were supporting these terrorists and setting up these networks for these guys. And even from the standpoint of Iraq, allowing all of this to take place in the first place. How do you focus on the Russian war crimes without bringing up the point of why the Russians were there in the first place? Oh, this tweet. I hate this tweet. I hate this tweet 1,000 times. I hate this tweet. It is aggravating when people look at the world through this lens in this way. Because you're looking at it in this kind of Russophobic way, missing the point of what we're doing. Not to mention the war crimes we were committing in Iraq. Do you realize we have a gulag off our coast that we couldn't bring into the country because it was illegal under our laws? The president of the United States was torturing people, which is again against our laws. And there's been no prosecution for it. We literally, understand me, literally invaded a country killing 1 million people. What does that look like? If any other country did that, what would be the consequence around the world? If Russia did that, what would be the consequence? I mean, come on. This notion of this American point of view is aggravating because the rest of the world doesn't have their point of view. And the perspectives that you end up taking are nonsensical and hypocritical. And you have to fall back to this position of, hey, don't bring up the whataboutism when you're criticizing other people. You don't want to have a, fair perspective and all about your own failings before you're lobbing stones. Lefty Khanna. Sad, deranged, delusional. This part. Putin annexed the Crimea. Let's talk about that one. Western powers backed a coup in Ukraine. And backing the coup in the Ukraine, this is, as you know, on the Russian border. So you can imagine they would be a little bit sensitive about these places being on their border. Now, whether the Crimea was a semi-autonomous region within Ukraine is less important. There was a coup in the Ukraine. The United States was supporting Nazis. You don't believe me? Look at the pictures with John McCain standing beside, what is that, Azov. Nazis. These Nazis were fighting Russians. And these were part of the paramilitary that the government was relying on in their military. The Crimea, most of which were Russians or Russian-speaking, took a vote. 97% of them chose to go with Russia. And if we're being honest, this was somewhat of a safety thing because they feared the people who were in these militaries, these these paramilitaries. What they never talk about in that is that the Crimeans wanted to go and that Russia intervened to some degree to save these guys from what they consider to be a violent uprising. And not uprising, but a coup. There was political instability based on the West supporting this coup. The Crimea decided to go. Russia, Putin, protected them in this process. Now the West screamed, oh my God, the Crimea was ripped away, missing the fact that it decided to go during a time of political turmoil. The West literally destabilized and smashed the state and put in somebody else that they were okay with. Now, the fact that they smashed the state matters less and never comes up. The only part that comes up is the theft of the Crimea. I mean, come on. Come on. Does Roe know this? And if he does know this, why is he putting this tweet out? Why is he putting this tweet out? All right, this video has gone too long. I just wanted to debunk this, thoroughly debunk this. I wanted to thoroughly debunk this. All right, I'm going to end this. Roe is more than welcome to come onto the show to defend this tweet. Roe would never come on the show to defend this tweet. This tweet is abominable, utterly reprehensible in regards to the way and the connotations, this level of propaganda. This is that old, 40s war propaganda that these guys are pushing within the context of the Democratic Party. So, sad, disappointing. Sad and disappointing. I'll leave it at that. If you guys enjoy the content, please consider supporting this content by sharing, liking, and of course, PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all. I hope this allows me to resume this on this exact same stream. Balthazar, faux Khanna was a fake from the get-go. We'll welcome his support when he's with progressive policy, but by no means can we count on him to do so. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I'm back. I saw this at the very end because Streamlabs didn't show my, it didn't pop up. Let's see. Donald Aldo. Jamal, what are your thoughts on this line of thinking from Ron Paul about stagflation from his YouTube channel? I saw part of that video. Ron Paul may be onto something in the way that he's thinking about this. But I got to be honest, I'm not sure. The financial channels talk about some kind of downturn, especially with the trade war. And they also are talking about this kind of... there's a certain degree of uncertainty because it's uncertain how the intrusion that Donald Trump is taking into the market is not having positive repercussions on the market. And as such, they are weirded out by this process. It is possible that, this leads to something else that's more dramatic of a problem. One of my subscribers had made the same point, but I got to be honest, I don't fully know. As for Balthazar, faux Khanna was a fake from the get-go. We'll welcome his support when he's with progressive policy, but by no means can we count on him to do so. Balthazar, you might be onto something, man. he seemed to be there with you on lefty policy, but this tweet is extremely problematic. Let me tell it. So I'm going to end this here. I'm going to fix Streamlabs, and I'm going to fix the chat here, because for whatever reason I did not see your live chat. I'll see you guys in a few. Thanks all.